I wasn't supposed to be the one who fought back. Not the one they dismissed at meetings, ignored at dinner, or cut out of family decisions. I was the quiet one. The reliable one. The daughter who always made space for everyone else until they pushed me too far. They took everything I built and tried to erase me with a lie. But they forgot one thing. I don't stay erased. This is the story of how I lost everything: my family, my job, my name, and how I took it all back one step at a time. The heavy rain slammed against the wide glass windows of Heir and Steele Global, blending with the harsh voices reverberating through the boardroom. Incompetent. Graham Steele's voice was razor-sharp. A thick folder flew from his hand, its contents scattering like fallen leaves across the polished walnut floor. Do you even realize how much your error could cost us? I stood across the table, fingers gripping the cool edge, my palms slick with sweat. The towering space, once awe-inspiring, now felt like a pressure chamber. Dad, I can fix it, I said, forcing the tremble from my voice. The contract hasn't been signed. There's still time. Fix it. A cold chuckle echoed from the corner of the room. My older brother, Alec, leaned back in his leather chair, smugness written across his face. You nearly sold off the Singapore logistics hub for half its worth, he sneered. Fix what exactly? This isn't a school project, Celia. I've been working 80-hour weeks for months, I started, my voice cracking. To do what? Graham cut me off, his voice a hammer. Make more reckless errors? Embarrass this family in front of the board? You've humiliated us, Celia. Behind him, my mother entered, poised as ever in a storm gray Prada suit. Her lips were painted sharp, her eyes unreadable. Graham, the board is waiting, she said evenly, as if nothing were happening. My father adjusted his tie, his expression going blank, professional. He didn't look at me again. We'll speak later, he muttered, and walked out. The glass doors hissed closed behind him. Silence stretched through the room. I stood there alone in the very place I once believed I'd earn my seat at the head of the table. Now all I had was Alec's scorn. Dad actually thought you'd take this company somewhere, Alec murmured, stepping closer. You're just a little girl playing CEO. But the game's over now. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard it hurt. That evening I was called to my father's office. It was dark except for a single desk lamp casting long shadows across the carpet. He didn't look up as I entered. You're fired, he said flatly. The floor dropped beneath me. What? Dad, you can't. You're no longer with Heir and Steele, he snapped. The board has lost confidence. You'll receive 6 months severance. That's more than generous. One mistake and that's it? I've worked nonstop. It's a mistake we can't overlook. He slid a folder across the desk. Your mother has secured you a job with your uncle in Portland. You leave tomorrow. Portland? I shook my head, stunned. I've built my life in Chicago. I'm not leaving. What you want is irrelevant, my mother said, appearing in the doorway. Her voice was ice. The decision's made. And just like that, I was erased. Your train leaves at 7:15 tomorrow morning, my mother added, her tone flat as stone. I didn't move. And if I say no? My father stood, adjusting his cufflinks as if he were preparing for a gala instead of discarding his own daughter. If you refuse, he said, his voice as cold as the storm outside, then don't expect anything. No severance. No contacts. No support. You'll be entirely on your own. I stayed rooted to the carpet as they left the room, two silhouettes slipping behind the heavy walnut door. The soft click of it closing sounded louder than thunder. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The storm outside continued its relentless rhythm against the glass, echoing in the silence they left behind. I stared down at my hands, still faintly trembling. Was I really cut off over a single error? No, not an error. A setup. Later that night, I sat hunched on the bed of a tiny motel near Union Station. The lampshade beside me was cracked, casting uneven yellow light on the peeling wallpaper. The rain outside blurred the city's skyline, the hum of traffic mixing with my restless thoughts. I opened my laptop, its glow slicing through the dim room like a spotlight. I pulled up the file, the logistics contract that supposedly ruined me. The one Alec waved in the boardroom like a smoking gun. My fingers hovered above the trackpad, my pulse pounding as I clicked through each clause. Then I reached the section in question. Clause 14.3, Singapore Freight Corridor, Sale Rights. I paused. The wording was strange. Not mine. The formatting didn't match, and the valuation figure was laughably off. My version had the hub priced at $126 million. This version? $68 million. I opened my original draft stored on a secure drive. Every section was clean, consistent. But the contract presented to the board had been gutted and rewritten. Line by line, the discrepancies screamed at me. My breathing quickened. Someone had deliberately sabotaged this deal and made it look like my fault. And only one person had that kind of server access. Alec. I closed my eyes, the pieces falling into place like a sinister puzzle. He had always hated sharing the spotlight. Ever since I joined the company, he viewed me as a threat, not a partner. But this wasn't rivalry. It was war. I stared at the screen, the tampered contract glowing like a weapon turned against me. My voice came out barely above a whisper. He did this. Alec did this. If Alec wanted to, he could have easily slipped into my project files, altered the data, and made it all look like my error. He had the authority, the access, and clearly the motive. It was him, I murmured, the words barely forming as my jaw tightened. My nails dug into my palms. Why would he go this far? I leaned back in the creaky motel chair, the pressure behind my eyes building. My thoughts raced as I tried to rewind the timeline, trace every detail I'd overlooked. Alec had always resented my presence at Harbor and Steele. The moment Dad announced I'd be overseeing future operations, Alec's fake smiles became fewer and his passive jabs more pointed. Of course he was furious. Dad saw me as the successor, his modern mind, as he liked to brag to the board. And Alec? He was the traditionalist. Obedient. Predictable. But Dad didn't want that. He wanted me. Or at least he used to. Now Alec had flipped the script. With one forged contract, he discredited me completely and solidified himself as the golden son. But he made one mistake. He didn't know what I was capable of when cornered. I turned back to the glowing laptop screen and opened the document properties. The author still listed as Celia Steele. That part had been smart, subtle. But not enough. I clicked into the metadata tab. My heart thudded louder with each scroll. Then I saw it. Last modification. 2:03 a.m., 2 days before the board meeting. Modified by, user ID as Steele1. Alec. He hadn't even tried to mask it. I stared at the screen, breath caught in my throat. He was so sure of himself. So careless in his arrogance. He really thought I'd crawl out of Chicago and never return. He expected me to accept the exile. He didn't expect me to fight back. I snapped the laptop shut, stood up, and moved to the motel window. The city shimmered under heavy rain and flickering street lamps, every raindrop smearing the view like an oil painting. That's when the knock came. I turned slowly, my coffee cup frozen midway to my lips. The air outside had turned bitter, fog draping the streets like a morning veil. When I opened the door, the last person I expected was standing there. Grandpa. I breathed. Harlan Steele, my grandfather, looked older than I remembered, but no less commanding. His long overcoat was soaked at the edges, and his steel blue eyes met mine with calm intensity. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped aside, still stunned. He walked in, deliberate and quiet, then set an aged leather briefcase on the small table. His movements were slow, thoughtful. "Do you know why I'm here?" he asked. I stayed quiet. He opened the briefcase, revealing documents sealed in crimson wax with the Harbor and Steele crest. My pulse surged. "I've been watching, Celia," he said. "And I know exactly what Alec did." "You knew the whole time?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Grandpa Harlan leaned back slightly, the faintest trace of a smirk on his face. "Alec thought I was just some tired old man clinging to his legacy. But arrogance makes people sloppy, Celia. Especially the ruthless ones." He slid the folder across the table. "Go ahead. Open it." With trembling fingers, I broke the wax seal stamped with the Harbor and Steele crest, unfolded the first page, and immediately recognized my work. Every detail, every line in perfect order. It was the version I had submitted, the real one. "This is the original contract you uploaded," Grandpa explained, his voice calm but firm. "I intercepted it before Alec got to it. Backed it up the same night." He reached into the briefcase again and pulled out another document, thin but dense. "This," he continued, "is a full printout of the server log. Time-stamped edits. 2 days before the board meeting. 2:03 a.m. I scanned the page, eyes zeroing in on the line highlighted in yellow. User, a Steele 1, edited clause 14.3 modified valuation field. My throat tightened as the confirmation sank in. Alec hadn't just framed me. He had done it while banking on no one ever checking. My hands curled around the paper. "I've kept everything," Grandpa said, watching me closely. "The timing is everything. Right now, you need a plan, not revenge." I met his gaze, the weight of betrayal pressing down hard. "So what now?" I just disappear. You reinvent, he said. Let them think they've won. Let them believe you've walked away with your tail between your legs. He leaned in, folding his arms on the table. I built Heir and Steele from nothing, Celia. Every foundation they're standing on came from my hands. And now I see clearly I gave control to the wrong people. I swallowed, my voice low. What do you want me to do? You're going to start your own company, he said, his tone like iron. A name Alec and your father would never connect to you. I'll fund it, he added. And I'll make a few quiet calls to old contacts. People who still owe me favors. I blinked. A logistics firm? He nodded. Global routes. Maritime, freight forwarding, special commodities. We'll call it Silver Bay Transit Group. You'll run it from Milwaukee, quiet, off the radar. Silver Bay, I echoed, the fire slowly igniting in my chest. But it won't just be a company, he said, his voice turning sharper. It'll be your way in. You'll track everything Alec touches. Every questionable contract, every shell transaction. Rumors say he's been moving cash through the Pacific Corridor. We catch him laundering even once. We take him down, I finished. He nodded. And you proved that they were wrong to ever doubt you. I stood up, a new clarity sharpening my focus. I'm ready. Grandpa rose too, his hand firm on my shoulder. No more waiting, Celia. It's your move now. You don't just need to outmaneuver them, Celia, Grandpa said, his voice low and firm. You need to bury them. Make sure they never even think about pulling something like this again. I didn't reply. I just turned to the window. Milwaukee's skyline was still veiled in morning haze, the faint glow of the harbor barely cutting through the fog. But inside me the fire was real and it was spreading fast. Silver Bay Transit Group wasn't just a company. It was a mission. A symbol of survival, rebirth, and revenge. The next morning was brisk, the kind of cold that sunk into your bones. But our office, a modest 3-story building tucked into a humming industrial zone, buzzed with energy. Celia, called a voice from down the hall. We just got a message from Barris Freight. It was Jenna, my assistant in first hire. Young, sharp-eyed, and fiercely loyal. She stepped into my office holding a thick folder. They've got a priority shipment stuck at the port of Newark. Their usual carrier bailed. Bring it to the conference room, I said, not taking my eyes off the glowing dashboard on my monitor. Routes, timelines, cargo metrics from East Coast ports to Southeast Asia. In less than a year, Silver Bay had carved out a place for itself in the logistics world. We weren't flashy, but we were efficient, adaptable, and relentless. And every route we handled told me something more about Alec's dealings back at Heir and Steele. As I stepped into the conference room, a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stood to greet me. His handshake was firm, his expression unreadable. Celia Steele, he said, I'm Martin Voss, CEO of Barris Freight. I've heard you specialize in tight timelines and impossible routes. I nodded once. I don't walk away from a challenge. He opened the folder and slid it across the table. We need this cargo moved from New York to Singapore in under 9 days. We reached out to Heir and Steele, but they're already maxed out. I flipped through the manifest. Large volume. High value. Fast turnaround. If they take this job, I said coolly, they'll have to freeze several of their other accounts just to manage the volume. You'll be compromising their entire global schedule. Martin's lips curved slightly. Exactly why we came to you. I looked him dead in the eye. I'll take the contract. But if we deliver exclusivity for the next 2 years. No more back and forth with Heir and Steele. He chuckled. Bold. I like that. He signed. And just like that, I'd taken another piece off Alec's chessboard. Exactly, Martin Voss nodded. And word is you've got a way of making these things happen without ever having to involve Heir and Steele. I closed the file and gave a measured smile. We can handle the job. But in return, I want exclusive shipping rights for Barris Freight for the next 2 years. Martin leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he studied me. You're not just here for this one contract, are you? No, I said calmly, I'm here for Heir and Steele's entire network. You sign with us and they lose one of their biggest clients. And that's just the beginning. He laughed, loud and genuine. I like the way you play the game, Celia. 3 days later, the contract was signed. It was the first major piece of the plan, tighten the grip on Alec's empire by slowly dismantling the client base he depended on. Every deal I made was a thread pulled from Heir and Steele's tapestry. And I made sure each one unraveled just a little more of his illusion of control. In the following weeks, I focused on reinforcing Silver Bay's infrastructure, faster response teams, tighter communication chains, and smarter port partnerships. Jenna handled client onboarding like she was born for it, and my legal team drafted airtight agreements that left no room for Alec to claw clients back. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. If I wanted to bring Alec down, I needed someone who could watch from the inside, someone who knew where the skeletons were buried and how to dig them up without leaving a trace. That person called me one quiet Saturday afternoon. The sun had dipped below the rooftops of the industrial district, casting golden light through the office blinds. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. "Celia," came the voice, smooth and amused. "It's been a while." I sat up. Reed Hannigan, former head of cybersecurity at Heir Steele. The same man Alec fired last year after accusing him of leaking internal protocols. Reed, who disappeared from the industry without a sound. "I heard Silver Bay is making waves," he said, tone light but loaded with intent. "And I heard you're looking for someone who can go through Heir Steele's systems without setting off alarms." I leaned back, my lips twitching into a smile. "And what do you want, Reed?" "To help," he said. "And to watch Alec implode." I nodded to myself. Reed wasn't just a tech expert. He was the only person alive who had built Heir Steele's original server architecture. If anyone could get in and out clean, it was him. "Fine," I said. "You'll get everything you need. But in return, I want everything on Alec from the last 3 years." Reed chuckled. "Celia, I won't just give you the data. I'll show you what he's really hiding." I ended the call and stared out at the Milwaukee skyline. Silver Bay was no longer just a logistics firm. It was a weapon. And I was just getting started. The data Reed had gathered over months of silent infiltration now filled my screen, every suspicious transaction, every offshore transfer Alec had tried to bury. I scrolled in silence, scanning lines of code and timestamps like they were pieces of a confession. Then my phone buzzed. Jenna's voice crackled through the line, thinner than usual. "Celia, it's about your grandfather." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "He passed away early this morning," she said gently. "It was a stroke. Peaceful. In his sleep." I didn't say a word. Couldn't. The man who had stood behind me when no one else did, the one who had handed me the keys to rebuild my life, to fight back, was gone. "There's going to be a memorial tomorrow," Jenna continued. "In Chicago. The whole family will be there. And the will is scheduled to be read afterward." That alone said everything. Alec would be there, chest puffed out, already imagining himself with the crown. The next morning, I stood beneath the towering arch of St. Bridget's Cathedral, the icy wind of Chicago's lakefront slicing through my coat. I stared at the heavy wooden doors, knowing what waited inside. I stepped in. The echo of whispers followed. No one looked at me. Not directly. My mother, Elaine, sat beside Alec, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though her face was stoic. Alec was dressed in black, but his smirk gave away the truth. He wasn't mourning. He was anticipating his ascension. He leaned toward me as I passed. "Didn't think you'd show," he whispered. "Thought Milwaukee had swallowed you whole." I didn't respond. My eyes were fixed on the casket, on the stillness, on the silence where Harlan Steele's voice should have been. After the service, the family gathered in the sleek office of Harper & Dunn, the firm that had handled our affairs for decades. The long table was polished to a mirror shine, but the air inside was dense with expectation. Alex sat near the head, arms crossed, face practically glowing. My mother sat beside him, her expression unreadable. I took a seat at the opposite end, calm and silent. Mr. Niles, the family's longtime attorney, opened the envelope and began to read. "I, Harlan James Steele, leave my personal assets, properties, investment accounts, and collectibles to my son Gregory Steele." Alex's grin widened. He glanced toward me, smug and victorious. "I leave my antique collection to my wife, Elaine Steele." My mother reached out and squeezed Alex's hand. Then Mr. Niles cleared his throat. "And regarding Harper & Steele Global." The room froze. "I hereby transfer my controlling shares, 55% of the company, along with full executive authority, to my only granddaughter, Celia Monroe Steele." Gasps broke the silence. Alex's face drained of color. My mother's lips parted in disbelief. The balance had shifted, and this time it was mine to hold. Alex's expression didn't change at first. It was as if the name, Celia Monroe Steele, had taken a second too long to register. Then his jaw twitched. The air in the room thickened. He shot up from his chair, eyes burning with disbelief. "What the hell is this?" he barked. Is this a mistake? Some kind of sick joke? My mother's mouth parted slightly, her face pale, her manicured fingers tightening around the armrest. No, she whispered. That can't be right. Alec is the successor. Celia was removed. But Mr. Niles was unmoved by their unraveling. He calmly placed a sealed envelope on the table. Your grandfather also left a letter addressed to the family. He asked that it be read aloud. He unfolded the crisp sheet and began. Alec, the letter read, you were once the future I believed in. But I came to see that your hunger for control outweighed your capacity to lead. You turned your sister into a threat instead of a partner. You lied. You manipulated. And when you couldn't outwork her, you destroyed her reputation. My throat tightened, but I kept my face still. Celia, the letter continued, you were cast out unfairly. Yet you rose with integrity, not vengeance. I watched how you rebuilt, how you never forgot what this company should stand for. Heir Steele needs a leader who understands vision, not vanity. You are that leader. Gasps and murmurs broke out around the table. Alex staggered a step backward, his face contorting with fury. What did you do? He growled. Did you lie to him? Manipulate him in his final days? I stayed seated, my hands clasped calmly in front of me. I didn't have to say a word. He saw it all on his own. Alex slammed his palm against the polished table. No, this isn't over. You're not going to get away with this. I stood locking eyes with him. This isn't the end, Alec. It's the start of everything I've worked for. Later that week, in the main conference room of Heir Steele, the board assembled for the first time under new leadership. Alex sat stiffly at the far end, now only a guest, his title gone. His skin was pale, his lips pressed in a thin, furious line. I stood at the head of the table. Let's begin, I said smoothly. Jenna connected a laptop to the large monitor. What I'm about to show you, I said, will explain exactly why I'm here, and why Alex Steele should never again sit at this table. The screen came alive with footage, grainy, time-stamped, and damning. It was time to reveal everything. The video on the screen flickered into focus, grainy but unmistakable. A security recording from the Heir Steele server room, dated and time-stamped, 2:03 a.m. The room went still. On the screen, the figure moved with precision, seated at a terminal typing furiously. Alex Steele. The footage zoomed in slightly, capturing the screen as it displayed the edit window. Clause 14.3. Singapore Freight Corridor Valuation. With a few keystrokes, the figure changed the number from $126 million down to $68 million, the exact figure I had been accused of mishandling. Gasps spread through the boardroom like a wave. I turned to face them. This is direct visual evidence that Alec accessed the contract file and altered it. Not to correct an error, but to fabricate one so he could eliminate me from the company. Chairs shifted. Murmurs intensified. Alec abused his executive access. He manipulated critical financial data. And he did it to orchestrate my removal based on falsified grounds. Across the table, Margaret Lynn, one of Alec's longtime supporters, looked pale. Alec, she said, her voice barely steady. Is this true? He jumped to his feet, face flushed. This is doctored. It's a fake. She staged it. She hired someone to impersonate me. I folded my arms. Then explain why the server logs are still intact. I made no changes. But we can verify everything right now. I gestured toward the door. It opened and Reed Hannigan entered, dressed in a dark blazer, holding a small black USB drive between his fingers. He walked calmly to the head of the table and plugged the device into the laptop. These, Reed said, are the untouched server activity logs from that night. He clicked a few keys and lines of digital entries appeared on the screen. User. A Steele 1 accessed the contract at 2:03 a.m. Changed valuation fields. Overwrote original. Logged out at 2:17 a.m. Alec took a shaky step back, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for an escape route. And one more thing, Reed added, opening a second file. Here's a recording of Alec's call with Vincent Darren, the offshore broker Alec used to process unregistered transactions through the Singapore corridor. The room exploded in gasps. Vincent Darren had been subpoenaed just last week. rumored to be cooperating with federal investigators. You didn't just sabotage me, Alec, I said, my voice cold. You laundered company funds. You betrayed our grandfather. And you made a mockery of this company's name. Alec collapsed into his chair, stunned, as Margaret stood up. I moved that Alec Steele be immediately removed from all executive roles at Heir and Steele. One by one, hands went up. The motion passed unanimously. I looked across the table at my brother, now pale and powerless. You thought you could erase me, I said. But I was always one step ahead. One by one, the board members raised their hands. Every single vote in favor. The decision is unanimous, Margaret Lynn said, turning to Alec with finality. You are hereby stripped of all executive authority at Heir and Steele. Effective immediately. Alec's shoulders slumped. His head dropped forward, resting against the table. He stared blankly at the polished wood, eyes vacant. I'll sue every one of you, he mumbled. You'll regret this. All of you. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a quiet, deliberate whisper near his ear. You had every chance to lead with integrity, Alec. But you chose deceit. You didn't just try to destroy me. You disgraced this company. I straightened and addressed the room. As of today, I will assume full leadership of Heir and Steele Global. We will begin a comprehensive restructuring. Those who upheld their duties with loyalty will be recognized. And those who acted in self-interest will be replaced. A ripple of energy swept the room. The applause started slow, then filled the entire space as people stood to their feet. 2 corporate security officers stepped forward. Alec stiffened but didn't resist as they cuffed his wrists and began escorting him toward the door. He turned back over his shoulder, eyes blazing. You think this is over? He snarled. You think you've won? You'll pay for this, Celia. I didn't answer. I simply watched as the doors closed behind him. This is what Grandpa built, I thought. And now it's finally mine to protect. The Chicago skyline outside the window was dimming as thick clouds rolled in, casting the city in a steely gray light. On the top floor of the Heir and Steele headquarters, I sat alone behind the same desk Alec once claimed as his throne. The office still felt cold, impersonal. But one thing had changed. At the center of the desk sat a single framed sheet of glass, inside it the forged contract. The fake numbers. The lies that almost broke me. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. The soft ticking of the antique wall clock echoed like a heartbeat. My mind swam with everything it took to get here, every sacrifice, every betrayal. Then the phone rang. I opened my eyes and glanced at the screen. No caller ID. Cautiously, I answered. Hello. There was only silence at first and then music. Familiar. Gentle. Claire de Lune. The melody my grandfather used to play on his record player while reviewing annual reports in his study. My breath caught. Then, a voice warm, low, unmistakable. You did well, Celia. I froze. Grandpa. My voice cracked. Tears blurred my vision. Is this? You fought harder than I ever imagined, he said softly. You protected what mattered. You made me proud. The line clicked. Silence. But somehow I knew he was still with me. Watching. Smiling. How are you talking to me? I whispered, gripping the phone tighter. You're gone. The voice on the line softened. This is a recording, Celia, Grandpa said gently. I asked Reed to send it to you once everything was over. Of course. Reed had planned for this moment too, quietly in the background, just like Grandpa always did. My throat tightened. Celia, his voice continued, warm but steady, you've taken back what's rightfully yours. But don't mistake power for peace. This isn't where the story ends. I swallowed hard, staring out across the skyline. Chicago's lights shimmered like scattered stars, flickering between skyscrapers and low fog. Power, he said, isn't something you own. It's something you guide. With clarity. With patience. With compassion. I closed my eyes, listening to each word like it was being etched into my bones. You've faced Alec and won. But new enemies will come, some from places you trust. Those I once relied on will now see you as the threat. You're no longer invisible, Celia. You're the one holding the reins now. And that makes you their next target. A chill moved through the room, sharp as wind off the lake. I knew he was right. Alec was only the first. The system that allowed him to thrive hadn't collapsed, it had merely shifted focus. Be vigilant, he said. The most dangerous enemy isn't the one charging through the front door. It's the one already inside, smiling. The line went quiet for a moment. Then in the gentlest tone he added, I'm proud of you. Not just for surviving, but for rising. For remembering who you are. And for protecting the legacy I tried so hard to build. The music returned, Claire de Lune, faint and haunting, like it was playing in another lifetime. Then the call ended. Silence. Call complete blinked across the screen. I lowered the phone slowly onto the desk. My chest rose and fell with shaky breath, the weight of the past and future pressing in on both sides. But I wasn't scared. I turned toward the framed glass in the center of the desk. Inside it, the altar contract. The forged figures. The digital lie that nearly destroyed me. I lifted the frame and studied the lines one more time. What once symbolized betrayal now represented something else, endurance. Alec had tried to erase me with numbers. But I rewrote the entire equation. I placed the frame down gently, stood tall, and walked to the window. The storm had passed. The streets below gleamed, still damp, reflecting 1,000 fragments of light. Life moved on. But I knew somewhere beyond the city, Grandpa was watching. Maybe even smiling. Celia Steele, once cast out and written off, was now at the helm. Not just of a company, but of a legacy. Her story isn't just about revenge. It's about truth, resilience, and never letting anyone else define your worth. What would you have done in her place? Let us know in the comments and stay tuned for more powerful, emotional family stories.